So what we're talking about today is right ways and wrong ways of behaving when we hear something that we don't like, but it's true. And it's one thing to hear things that we don't like that are also not true. And that does happen sometimes. People accuse us of things we didn't do. People say untrue things just to be mean. But that is not what we're talking about. We're talking about when we hear things that we don't like, but they're true. And right at the start, can you think of some good ways of responding when you hear something like that? And maybe also of some bad ways of responding when you hear something like that. And the story that we're going to turn to now is about somebody who heard a message that he didn't like. And we know that the message was true because it was from the Lord. And the person who heard the message was the king of Judah named Jehoiakim. And Jehoiakim and all the people had been worshiping false gods. They'd been worshiping idols. So what happened is that the Lord told Jeremiah the prophet to take all of the Lord's warnings, all of the Lord's messages about the bad things that were going to happen if the people kept on worshiping idols, and write all that stuff down in a book. Here's the very beginning of the story from Jeremiah 36. Now it came to pass in the 4th year of Jehoiakim the son of Josiah, king of Judah, that this word came to Jeremiah from the Lord, saying, "Take a scroll of a book and write on it all the words that I have spoken to you against Israel, against Judah, and against all the nations from the day I spoke to you, from the days of Josiah, even to this day. It may be that the house of Judah will hear all the adversities which I propose to bring upon them, that everyone may turn from his evil way, that I may forgive their iniquity and their sin." Pause there for a moment. So the Lord's instructions to Jeremiah were, take all the words that I've spoken against Israel and Judah and write them down. Write down all of the messages about the bad things that are going to happen if they don't change your ways. And that's a pretty tough message, right? You're doing the wrong thing, and bad stuff's going to happen if you don't change. But did you notice why the Lord sent this message? What was he hoping would happen? This is really important. It said it there at the end of that introductory reading. Why did the Lord send this message? Yes, Rosalie. So that he could forgive the people. Yeah, because he wanted the people to hear the message so that they could change what they were doing and be forgiven. And that's a really, really important thing to understand. That's always that way with the Lord. He may say things that we don't want to hear, but he says them because he knows they're what we need to hear, and he wants to help us and heal us. And the way the story goes is that Jeremiah speaks all the words that the Lord tells him to speak, and somebody named Baruch, a scribe, writes them all down. And then Baruch goes to the temple and he reads the book or the scroll. He reads it where everybody can hear. And there are some important people, some scribes and princes, who hear that message and they think, we need to, reflect on this in private. We need to have a private conversation about this. And so they call Baruch to come to them in private with the scroll so they can talk some more about this stuff. Because these important people, they know that this is a problematic message. There are some important people who might not like this message. And the story continues. So Baruch, the son of Neriah, took the scroll in his hand and came to them. And they said to him, "Sit down now and read it in our hearing." And so Baruch read it in their hearing. Now it happened when they had heard all the words that they looked in fear from one to another and said to Baruch, "We will surely tell the king all these words." And they asked Baruch, saying, "Tell us now, how did you write all these words? At his instruction?" So Baruch answered them, "He proclaimed with his mouth all these words to me, and I wrote them with ink in the book." And then the princes said to Baruch, "Go and hide, you and Jeremiah, and let no one know where you are." And they went to the king into the court, but they stored the scroll in the chamber of Elishama the scribe and told all the words in the hearing of the king. So the king sent Jehudi to bring the scroll, and he took it from Elishama the scribe's chamber. And Jehudi read it in the hearing of the king and in the hearing of all the princes who stood beside the king. Now the king was sitting in the winter house in the 9th month with a fire burning on the hearth before him. And it happened, when Jehudi had read 3 or 4 columns, that he cut it with the scribe's knife and cast it into the fire that was on the hearth, until all the scroll was consumed in the fire that was on the hearth. Yet they were not afraid, nor did they tear their garments, the king nor any of his servants who heard all these words. Nevertheless, Elnathan, Delaiah, and Gemariah implored the king not to burn the scroll, but he would not listen to them. And the king commanded Jerahmeel the king's son, Seraiah the son of Azriel, and Shelemiah the son of Abdeel to seize Baruch the scribe and Jeremiah the prophet, but the Lord hid them. Now, after the king had burned the scroll with the words which Baruch had written at the instruction of Jeremiah, the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah, saying, "Take yet another scroll, and write on it all the former words that were in the first scroll, which Jehoiakim the king of Judah has burned." Amen. So when Baruch goes to those princes, they hear the message and they say, "The king's not going to like this, but we got to tell him." And they tell Baruch and Jeremiah to go hide, and then they go tell the king the message. And the scroll is read in the presence of King Jehoiakim. And he's sitting next to a fire because it's wintertime. He wants to be warm. What did he do with the scroll? Dale. He threw it in the fire. He burned it up. Burned up the scroll. This, by the way, is a blank piece of paper. We're not actually burning the Lord's word, because that's not a good idea, is it? And obviously he didn't use a lighter. He just threw it into the fire. Now, why did the king do this? What was he thinking? What was he feeling? Yeah.
I don't like it. I want it to go away.
Yeah, I do not like this, and I want it to go away. What emotion would you say he had going on inside? Anger, yeah. It looks, especially because it says first he cut the scroll up and then he threw it in the fire. That's a little excessive, right? Yeah, Ned. Oh, well, yeah, that too, right. He was probably angry because he was scared. Yeah. Infuriated? Insecurity. Oh, insecurity, yes. That portrays a lot of insecurity. If he had not been afraid, he might have been able to listen. Very true. He wanted that message to go away. Did it work? Not at all. Didn't work at all. The Lord just told Jeremiah, write another scroll with all the same words on it. And in fact, we're told later on that the scroll actually got longer. The story says that Baruch wrote a new scroll with all of the same words, and besides, there were added to them many similar words. So the king burned the scroll, and then the scroll just got longer. And you can compare this with all sorts of things that we might experience today. If a driver gets a speeding ticket for driving too fast, and then they go home and they burn the speeding ticket, are the police going to say, "Oh, you don't have to pay anymore"? Or if you burn your W-2, your tax form, does that mean you no longer have to pay taxes? Doesn't work like that. Of course not. And just, we can look at Jehoiakim and say, yeah, duh, that's exactly what you should have expected. Of course, you're not going to make the Lord's words go away by burning the scroll. And we might look at him and say, that was really silly. To think that would make anything better, that was silly. But all of us can do something that's kind of similar. Because, like we said, what Jehoiakim did, he did because he was angry and fearful and insecure. And the fire that's in that story, in the spiritual sense of the word, fire symbolizes love, but it also symbolizes anger or hatred. And so in the spiritual sense, this is a picture of getting mad at the truth and imagining that that's going to fix something. And we can do that to the Lord, to the Lord's truth, and we can also do that to other people in our lives. And sometimes the Lord knows that the truth we need to hear comes out of the mouths of the people around us. Can you think of examples of things that, say, a mother or a father or a spouse might say that would be hard to hear, but also true? For example, you keep on not cleaning up after yourself, and it's getting frustrating. Or as another example, it does not feel good when you talk to me that way, with that tone of voice. And what are the different ways that we can respond when we hear that? And what would it look like to do basically what Jehoiakim did, to throw the message in the fire? Yes? I do not, right. You flare up, you fire back, you get angry. No, that's not true. Or you attack. You're always hassling me. You're never nice to me either. It's not my fault. This is someone else's fault. And we know when we're sitting in a quiet space away from the heat of the moment, we know that that's not going to make anything better. Just like Jehoiakim throwing that scroll into the fire did not make anything even a little bit better. Something that we're told in the heavenly doctrine of the New Church is that the evil spirits, the hells, they hate the Lord's truth, and they hate his goodness and his mercy. And they hate these things so much that when they hear the truth, or when they see the Lord loving and protecting his people, they can fly off the handle and try to attack. They're just driven crazy by this truth and this goodness. And of course, it never works out very well for them when they do that. Here is a brief reading about that, which you can also find on the back of your handout. The Lord's zeal, which in itself is love and compassion, is seen by the evil as anger. For when the Lord in love and mercy protects his own in heaven, those ruled by evil are indignant and angry with the good. They plunge into the sphere where divine good and truth are, endeavoring to destroy those who are there. But then the divine truth of divine good acts on them and causes them to experience torments like those suffered in hell. As a consequence of this, they attribute wrath and anger and also all evil to the divine, when in fact there is no anger whatever in the divine, nor any evil whatever, only pure forbearance and mercy. So when those evil spirits try to attack, they end up getting hurt. They suffer torments. And that is not because the Lord hurts them. There's nothing but love and compassion in the Lord. What they're doing is a little bit like getting mad at the sun and deciding to have a staring contest with the sun, or getting mad at a wall, stone wall, and deciding to punch it. You do those things, you're not going to be happy, and it will not be the sun's fault or the wall's fault. But the point is that those spirits are with us sometimes. Sometimes those are the voices in our head. And when those spirits hear the truth, or when they see something good, they might get mad, and then they might try to make us get mad too. But is that going to make anybody any happier at all? So here's the question that really matters. What should Jehoiakim have done when he heard that message? What is the right way to respond when we hear something that's true that we didn't want to hear? Becca.
It mentioned it in the story, something he didn't tear his clothes. Sad.
Oh, right, yes, they didn't tear their clothes and lament. That's right. That's what they should have done. Tearing clothes was a symbol of recognizing that something really bad had happened, or that they had done something really bad. And that's what they should have done. They should have said, yes, we did something bad. What were you going to say, Gideon? Okay. I'm going to talk about one more story from the Word now, a story that shows us a different way of behaving. And this one's about another king, this time King David. David heard a message that he really didn't want to hear, and it was because he had done things that he really shouldn't have done. He had broken the Lord's commandments. He had committed adultery, and he had killed somebody. And he thought that he'd managed to keep all of that stuff a secret, but of course the Lord knew about it. And so the Lord sent a prophet to him, a prophet named Nathan. And Nathan told David a story that was about a rich man who stole a lamb from a poor man. And when David heard that, he got really mad at the rich man, because of course that's a terrible thing for the rich to steal from the poor. David said that the rich man should be punished. And then Nathan said to him, "You are the man." And David realized that the story had actually been about him, that he was like that rich man because he had used his power as king to take things from people less powerful than himself. And so up to this point, what David's done in this story is not good at all. But here's the thing that he does right. When Nathan tells him that the Lord knows what he's done, David's response is to say, "I have sinned against the Lord." And that's all he says. He doesn't say, no, here's what really happened. And he doesn't say, look, it was just one mistake, and then it kind of spiraled out of control, and here's why it wasn't my fault. He doesn't make excuses. He doesn't justify. He doesn't pretend. And think how much energy he saves by doing this. Trying to pretend that the truth isn't true is exhausting, because the truth just keeps on showing up. It keeps on shining through. And so we have to kind of rush around inside our minds, smushing and smothering that truth wherever it shines through. When we've done something wrong, we usually know it. At least in our hearts, we know it. And that's where the insecurity comes from. There's lingering guilt. There's an anxiety that's rooted deep in our hearts. And all of that stuff is stuck. It's bottled up inside because we are trying to pretend that it's not there. But when we just admit the truth, when we say, yes, that was wrong, it was a sin, which means it was against God's commandments, that's when we gain the ability to let go of all of that anxiety, that guilt, all of the unpleasant feelings that we were holding on to. They come out, and for a moment we have to see them and feel them, and then we can say, but I am choosing to move forward. I am choosing to accept the Lord's offer to heal me. That was the choice that I made then. I'm going to do something different now. And that's why the Lord says, you will know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. And all of this connects back to what we said way at the beginning of this talk about the reasons why the Lord sent the people that scroll. He sent them the scroll so that they could change their ways and be healed. Sometimes he tells us things that we don't want to hear, sometimes in his word, sometimes through the mouths of other people. And he says those things because he knows that we'll be happier and we'll be free if we are willing to say to him, yes, Lord, that is the truth. Amen.